Welcome to The Debate. Today we are diving into, well, probably the darkest, most deceptive corner of human psychology. Imagine a predator who doesn't bare their teeth but instead weaponizes their own tears.
Yeah, it's a chilling thought.
It really is. Imagine someone who slowly dismantles your sanity not with shouting or, physical intimidation, but with heavy sighs, tragic stories, and just an endless parade of victimhood. Today, we are analyzing covert narcissism.
Right.
I have spent years profiling behavioral predators. And what makes this specific psychological profile so uniquely dangerous is its highly calculated architecture. When you decode a covert narcissist, you find a predatory system that masterfully uses what the clinical literature calls protective dysphoria.
Hmm.
They use it to mask grandiose superiority behind this shy, introverted, or even seemingly depressed persona. So my position today is that the true danger lies in how they systematically manufacture pity to control you.
Well, I hear your focus on this architectural blueprint, and it's important. But as a trauma-informed therapist, my concern is the wreckage that blueprint leaves behind in the victim's mind.
Sure.
Analyzing the predator's mechanics often um, sanitizes the sheer horror of the target's lived reality. We are talking about invisible psychological destruction here.
Right, but the mechanics.
Just to finish my point, the defining feature of covert narcissism isn't just the tactical use of pity. It is the devastating emotional toll of the endless walking on eggshells. It's the absolute crazy-making consequences of covert gaslighting. The danger isn't just the tactic, it's the systematic erosion of the victim's fundamental grip on reality.
I get that, but if we want to understand how that reality gets eroded, we have to look at the foundational structure of the abuser first. Covert narcissism is, at its core, a highly structured, predatory system.
It is, yeah.
Clinical research points to the 4 pillars of narcissism: a profound lack of empathy, underlying grandiosity, intense entitlement, and an unceasing need for external validation.
Right, the standard criteria.
Exactly. Now, an overt narcissist boasts, right? They command the room, they tell you how great they are. But the covert narcissist hides those exact same pillars under a meticulously crafted facade of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
They suffer from high neuroticism and incredibly fragile self-esteem. So how do they get their narcissistic supply? They actively invest in a depressive outlook. This is the tactic known as protective dysphoria.
Okay, but we have to be very careful with how we frame that, because when you say they invest in a depressive outlook, it makes it sound like a conscious strategic board meeting they hold in their own heads.
Well, it is absolutely a transaction, whether it's fully conscious or deeply instinctual. They are not truly clinically depressed in the way we traditionally understand major depressive disorder.
Right, where someone is immobilized by neurochemical despair.
Exactly. A covert narcissist uses manufactured suffering to dodge personal accountability. They extract this unique martyr-like status from everyone around them. Think of it as a transactional trap.
A trap. Yeah, that's a good word for it.
They use their suffering as a currency. If they are always the biggest victim in the room, they purchase compliance, power, and, unearned loyalty from their targets. You are never allowed to criticize them, because how could you possibly criticize someone who is already hurting so much?
And that is exactly where the devastation begins for the target. Because focusing too heavily on the mechanics of their transactional trap kind of misses the beauty and the beast paradox that the victim is actually experiencing.
How so?
Well, the most chilling element of this disorder isn't the underlying grandiosity. It's the horrific shock of the devaluation phase. During the idealization phase, this person doesn't seem like a predator at all.
Right, they play the victim.
They play the perfect, sensitive, deeply understanding, perhaps slightly wounded soulmate. They mirror the target's deepest vulnerabilities. But once that target is hooked, the reality is slowly dismantled.
Through the subtle, agonizing withdrawal of affection.
Yes, and chronic blame shifting.
Because the facade is exhausting for the narcissist to maintain.
Exactly. And when the mask slips, the victim is left holding the bag. I mean, studies in the source material document a 40% increase in anxiety-related symptoms for people living in this specific dynamic.
40%? Wow.
It's staggering. We're talking about severe hypervigilance, chronically elevated cortisol, and somatic symptoms like unexplained chronic pain. The victim is left constantly managing a fragile ego, trapped in a self-fulfilling loop of guilt and isolation.
They exhaust themselves.
Completely. They exhaust themselves trying to love the beast back into the prince, entirely unaware that the beast is the reality and the prince was always just an illusion.
Right. And if you look at the specific bait they use, it almost looks like depression, as you mentioned, the wounded soulmate. But wait, look at how they use pity. That's not depression, that's weaponized guilt.
Oh, 100%.
This is where the profound deception happens. A covert narcissist will utilize like a carefully constructed sob story right at the exact moment you attempt to hold them accountable.
Right. The pivot.
Exactly, the pivot. If you bring up a legitimate grievance, say they drained a joint bank account or ruined a holiday, they instantly pivot to how terrible their childhood was or how they just feel like a failure who can never do anything right.
Yes.
They extract their narcissistic supply not by demanding admiration, but by demanding your sympathy.
This is exactly what trips victims up, because covert narcissists specifically target highly empathetic people. They don't target people with rigid boundaries, you know?
Right, they look for the helpers.
They look for the fixers, the deeply compassionate individuals. So when the narcissist pivots to that sob story, the empathetic victim internalizes this weaponized guilt completely.
They think it's their fault.
Yes. They don't see a predator shifting the goalposts. They see a wounded bird who needs saving. And this behavior creates an impossible trap that forces family members into rigid survival roles.
Like the scapegoat?
Exactly, the scapegoat who calls out the behavior and is severely punished for it. Or the enabler who furiously works to keep the narcissist placated.
You also see this in their use of superficial altruism. I mean, they will do a favor for you, often one you expressly didn't ask for, solely to demand unearned praise.
Oh, the strings attached.
Endless strings. They hold it over your head forever. They control the narrative by becoming the ultimate martyr.
Yeah, let's look at the specific gaslighting phrases the material highlights for this exact behavior. A classic line is, "After all I've done for this family, you repay me with this?"
Wow, yeah, that's a heavy one.
It is, and when a covert narcissist drops a line like that, they aren't just fishing for a compliment. They are actively rewriting the power dynamic of the relationship. They force the victim entirely onto the defensive.
So the original issue is completely forgotten.
Exactly. Instead of addressing whatever boundary the narcissist just crossed, the victim is suddenly scrambling to prove their worth. They have to prove their devotion and prove they aren't ungrateful. And the narcissist gets to just sit back and consume all that frantic emotional energy.
But you see, that weaponized guilt only works because of the micro-tactics they use behind closed doors to enforce the hierarchy. If we want to understand how they train the victim to scramble like that, we really must look directly at the behavioral cues of passive aggression.
The silent treatment.
Exactly. When an overt narcissist doesn't get their way, they will rage. They will yell, throw things, intimidate. A covert narcissist cannot do that because direct explosive rage threatens their precious good person facade.
Right. They have to stay the victim.
So how do they express their anger? Through calculated micro-insults and nonverbal cues.
Which are entirely invisible to the outside world.
Completely invisible. We are talking about the heavy, exhausted yawns right when you are speaking about something deeply important to you. We are talking about the deep, dramatic sighs when you ask for basically baseline human decency.
The eye rolls.
The eye rolls when your back is turned but just visible in the mirror. We're talking about the intentional withholding of essential information, like forgetting to tell you about an important meeting or a bill that was due.
Right. Plausible deniability.
Yes. And of course, deliberate procrastination on shared responsibilities, also known as weaponized incompetence. They will do the dishes so badly, leaving food on every plate, that you eventually just do it yourself. It is a highly evolved predatory tool.
I agree, those are the tools, but we really cannot understate the psychological toll of this silent treatment and passive aggression. It is not just annoying.
Oh, it's far beyond annoying.
It is not just the frustration of having to rewash dishes. It is a calculated, devastating emotional withdrawal that leaves victims completely disoriented. They are starved for baseline human connection.
Right.
And why does a heavy sigh or yawn destroy someone's reality? Because of exactly what you just mentioned, plausible deniability.
It creates an intense cognitive dissonance.
It completely fractures the victim's threat detection system. If an overt narcissist screams in your face, your brain processes that as an attack. Your reality matches the environment.
Makes sense?
But when a covert narcissist sighs heavily, slams a cabinet, and then looks you in the eye and sweetly says, "I'm not mad. Why are you being so sensitive?" Your brain goes haywire.
Because the input doesn't match the output.
Exactly. Your body feels the aggression. Your nervous system is screaming that you are in danger. But the abuser denies the aggression even exists. Over years, this disconnect between what your body feels and what your partner admits to is exactly what shatters your sanity.
Which leads perfectly to the clinical mechanism of rewriting history.
Right. And the source material explicitly calls this the Assyrian king phenomenon.
Fascinating concept.
Historians tell us about these ancient Assyrian kings who, after losing a battle, would literally chisel their defeats off the stone monument and only record their glorious victories. They rewrote reality so future generations would think they were infallible.
And the narcissist does this in the living room.
The covert narcissist does this to your shared history, yes. You finally break down, you confront them about months of passive aggression, and they systematically deploy this phenomenon. They erase their own malice.
I never said that.
Right. They look the weeping victim in the eye and say, "I don't recall things that way. Are you sure your anxiety isn't just acting up again? You know how confused you get?"
Wow.
Do you understand what that does to a person's brain over 5, 10, or 20 years? It slowly, methodically erodes the target's memory. It drives the victim to question their own fundamental grip on reality. It is profound psychological violence disguised as gentle, loving concern.
It is psychological violence, absolutely. Which brings us to the mechanism of defense. Because the covert narcissist relies entirely on extracting that emotional reaction, whether it's guilt, confusion, or frantic attempts to appease them, the only clinical defense against this predatory behavior, assuming the victim cannot immediately leave, is the gray rock method.
Ha! Which is, I have to say, highly controversial when we look at long-term outcomes.
Controversial perhaps, but mechanically necessary. You have to starve the predator. The mechanics of gray rock are simple but highly effective. You stick to brief, strictly factual responses.
Right.
You speak in a flat, monotone voice. You avoid sustained eye contact, and you act completely, utterly uninteresting. By doing this, you actively deny them their narcissistic supply.
You stop giving them the emotional reaction.
Exactly. You neutralize the emotional payoff of their provocation. If they sigh heavily, you do not ask what's wrong. You ignore it. If they deploy the Assyrian king narrative and deny what happened yesterday, you don't argue with them or pull out a calendar to prove them wrong. You offer a non-committal "I see," and you walk away. You dismantle their power by refusing to engage with the emotional undertow of their manipulation.
I know this is the standard advice, and I acknowledge it works in the short term to de-escalate a crisis. If you are trying to survive a holiday dinner or safely navigate a custody handoff, absolutely, use gray rock.
But
But as a clinician who works with the aftermath of this abuse, gray rocking terrifies me when used as a long-term strategy for living. Let's look closely at the source material on the physiological costs.
okay, let's hear it.
Constantly suppressing your own emotions and flattening your affect to survive your daily life causes severe emotional numbing. It leads to profound psychological disconnection and a literal loss of identity.
Because you're shutting down.
Yes. You have to understand the mechanism here. You are not just being boring to a narcissist. You are also being boring to yourself. You are actively shutting down your own emotional vitality, your own joy, your own spontaneous reactions, and your own light, just to manage someone else's pathology. Over time, that breeds complex trauma.
Well, I am not convinced that the blame for complex trauma should be laid at the feet of the gray rock method. Because we have to ask, what is the alternative? Open communication? Vulnerability?
Well, not exactly.
The material explicitly states that trying to explain yourself to a covert narcissist is the single biggest clinical error a target can make. The narcissist doesn't want mutual understanding. They want control.
That is true.
When you sit down and try to express your vulnerability, when you look them in the eye and say, "It hurts me deeply when you do this," you are not fostering intimacy. You are simply handing a predator perfectly packaged emotional ammunition.
Oof, yeah.
They will take your vulnerability, parse it as a weakness, and use it to label you as too sensitive or irrational. So yes, gray rocking requires emotional suppression. But compared to the alternative of having your reality continuously dismantled and your vulnerabilities weaponized against you, it is the only tactical shield available to a victim still in the environment.
That is a compelling argument for survival in the trenches. But have you considered that the ultimate alternative isn't just open communication with the abuser?
What is it then?
The true alternative is radical detachment and external reality preservation. The problem with treating gray rock as a permanent shield is that it keeps the victim in the war zone, just wearing much heavier armor.
That's a fair point.
The true defense isn't just about neutralizing the narcissist's supply. It's about fiercely protecting the victim's external support networks. Covert narcissists deliberately isolate their targets. They subtly critique your friends, your family, your therapist.
They have to eliminate the witnesses.
Exactly, because external reality testing, someone outside the relationship saying, hey, that's actually not normal, is the greatest threat to their control. So the alternative to handing them emotional ammunition is to stop looking to the abuser for validation entirely.
To outsource your reality checks.
Right. You take that massive amount of emotional energy, the exhausting energy you were using to play gray rock and monitor their moods, and you channel it into a private log of events to anchor your own memory against the Assyrian king phenomenon. You channel it into non-abusive relationships outside the system. You don't just become an unfeeling rock in their house. You build an entirely new foundation away from them.
I completely agree that external support and reality logging are vital. But the reality is many people cannot immediately leave these relationships.
True.
They share minor children, they own businesses together, or they are deeply enmeshed in cultural or extended family structures. This is precisely why understanding the behavioral architecture of the covert narcissist is so critical. If you understand the cognitive schemas driving them, specifically the core wound of toxic shame hidden by the belief that I am fundamentally superior to others, but the world is too unfair to recognize it, you stop internalizing their behavior.
You see the mechanics.
Right. You recognize that their hidden envy and their hostile attribution bias are mechanical, reflexive responses to their own immense fragility. When they use weaponized incompetence, pretending they can't handle a basic household chore so you'll do it for them, you stop thinking, I must be too demanding.
You realize they feel entitled to your labor.
Yes. Decoding these specific tactics strips the covert narcissist of their mystical power. It turns them from a terrifying monster into a highly predictable machine.
Decoding is helpful, yes, but only if it leads to the victim stepping permanently out of the dynamic. Because the covert narcissist is uniquely equipped to keep you decoding forever.
How so?
They are incredibly adept at dropping breadcrumbs of false self-awareness to keep the empathetic victim on the hook. They will make tearful, false promises about going to therapy, or worse, they will go to therapy, learn the clinical terminology, and weaponize it to further gaslight the victim.
Oh, the weaponized therapy speak.
I have seen it 100 times in my practice. The covert narcissist learns the word boundary and suddenly uses it to justify their abusive silent treatments. They learn the word gaslighting and accuse the victim of doing it to them.
Wow.
The intellectual exercise of profiling their behavior can actually become a secondary trap for the victim. It keeps them engaged in a never-ending quest to, figure the narcissist out, to find the right combination of words to finally make them see the truth. Instead, the victim needs to recognize that the relationship is fundamentally devoid of affective empathy.
So the focus has to shift.
Completely. The focus must remain on rescuing the victim's nervous system, which is constantly trapped in fight or flight.
Well, regardless of whether we approach this by analyzing the abuser's predatory tactics or the victim's shattered nervous system, the conclusion drawn from the clinical data remains exactly the same. The illusion of change must be completely surrendered.
Absolutely.
Surviving a covert narcissist requires seeing completely past the shy, introverted, heavily victimized mask. It requires recognizing the cold, transactional, and intensely entitled architecture underneath.
Yeah.
It is about identifying the micro-insults, the protective dysphoria, and the weaponized pity for exactly what they are: predatory tools used to extract your compliance and consume your energy. When you finally see the machinery behind the tears, you can systematically dismantle its leverage over you.
And true survival means something much deeper than just understanding that abuses machinery. It means victims must stop trying to explain their soul to a person who is entirely committed to misunderstanding them.
That's beautifully said.
They must step entirely out of that crazy-making cycle. It requires fiercely protecting their own grip on reality, deeply grieving the reciprocal relationship they thought they had but never actually existed, and relying heavily on external support networks to heal the profound emotional and psychological damage. It is about shifting the focus from outmaneuvering the narcissist to unconditionally supporting, protecting, and validating yourself. It is a chilling complexity, isn't it? How this specific psychological profile manages to twist the absolute best parts of human nature, our empathy, our patience, our innate desire to heal and comfort others, into a highly effective weapon against us.
It really is. It turns a partnership, a family, or a workplace into a silent, psychological battlefield where the most damaging blows leave absolutely no physical marks.
It truly does. And it leaves us reflecting on the dark capacity of the human mind for manipulation, often hiding behind the very vulnerabilities we are evolutionarily wired to protect.
Right.
The realization that the person crying out for your help might actually be the one orchestrating your destruction is a terrifying paradigm shift.
There is still so much more to uncover in this material regarding human behavior and the lengths to which the fragile ego will go to protect itself.
So much more.
We leave it to you, the listener, to decide where the ultimate path to safety lies, whether it is found in ruthlessly decoding and outmaneuvering the predator's tactics, or in the deep, necessary work of rebuilding the victim's shattered reality away from the war zone. But the next time you encounter someone who constantly demands your sympathy while quietly eroding your sanity, remember the hidden mechanisms we've discussed today. Imagine a predator who doesn't bare their teeth, but instead weaponizes their own tears. Thank you for joining us.